Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to the Late Night Gang, Outer Space Mitch, Rod, Anthony, David, BC, Lazy One, Colst, Boji, Not Around, Quavi, E Strader, The Snow, Mark, Iceberg. What up, everybody? Wanted to do a little bit of a quicker Q&A today. Going to go try to keep it 45 minutes to an hour. I have date night with my wife, so I do have a hard out here. And of course, not much has really changed since last night, but wanted to hop on here and get into whatever questions you guys have. Also, I mean, I think the only piece of news today that I think is interesting is the Lakers sent Dalton Knecht down to the G League for the first time this season. They also sent down Adu Thero. That one is a bit more predictable, but with Dalton, they didn't really send him frequently last season. So to send him at this point, I don't think it's like a big deal necessarily, but it is a little bit of a signal of where the Lakers feel he is at right now but maybe it is an opportunity for him to get some time with South Bay and to regain some of maybe the confidence that he hasn't quite had since last season, or at least get in-game reps, right? Like I think that's a really important thing for a young player who is not getting those rotation reps necessarily on a nightly basis, as maybe only playing in garbage time situations, to actually get in-game reps beyond just practice, because playing 5-on-5 with your teammates can only go so far. And even if it's not necessarily the ultimate competition that he'll be judged against in terms of like NBA level competition, getting some reps in the G League, putting up some 20, 25, 30 point nights, I think that could boost his confidence, reaffirm his skill set and just his value to the team, and also, again, get him some much needed reps. But other than that, I thought that was the only interesting thing from today. Iceberg says, salute the mods and the chat. Yes, appreciate you guys for running the show on the back end here. I appreciate it. Mishra says, hey, Jovan, I got the criticism against Luka, but people need to relax. I agree. I think like the percentages have not been what we're accustomed to with Luka. As I said on Lakers Collective, I think he's shooting 37% and 23% on 37% overall, 23% on threes since returning from Slovenia. And if you look at the Philly game, the San Antonio game, the Phoenix game, I mean, he's still putting up 31, 8 and 8, but the way he's doing it has not been as efficient as it was before he returned. But I think a lot of the criticism has been a bit too harsh on him, and this is a relatively small sample size where he has not been playing his best basketball, but over the course of the full season, he has obviously been having one of the best seasons of his career, is putting up career high numbers in a multitude of statistics. So I don't want to overreact or have collective amnesia with what Luka has done up to this point in the season. The Lakers are not 18-7 and in fourth place in the West, if not for Luka carrying them for a lot of games this year and carrying them for a lot of first quarters and a lot of first halves that the Lakers did not, guys weren't making shots, guys weren't in rhythm. There's a lot of turnovers, whatever. And like Luka was putting up 20, 25, 30 points in the first half, carrying LA, keeping them within striking distance, and then the group collectively having a much better second half. So yeah, I understand the criticism to an extent, and I think it's healthy to hold everybody accountable. I think no one should be above being criticized or critiqued, but I also don't want to overreact to some of Luka's recent play and act like he's been like terrible also, because he still gives you a baseline that is higher than, like, a Luka off night is still better than a lot of players' good nights. And there's still a baseline there that I think is really important. Michael says, Jovan, I want Marcus to start. Monkey Paw Girls. Austin is out. LOL. I mean, that's one way for Marcus to start is if there's no Austin, I guess. But look, I think the thing with Marcus continues to be his health and his availability. I think the impact is clear. After last night, he regained the team lead in terms of on-off differential and in terms of looking at the on-court rating with a player versus the off-court rating. He just nudged past Austin after last night. So Marcus has been one of the most impactful players this season. The biggest impact has been on the defensive end, where the Lakers are nearly 10 points per 100 possessions better with Marcus on versus Marcus off. So whether he's coming off the bench or starting, LA needs Marcus. He is making a real impact. I thought the starting group had some of their better recent stretches defensively with Marcus on the floor compared to what it had looked like previously. So of course I would like him to continue to start because I think that's the right move, but I don't anticipate that changing. I anticipate it will still be Rui as the fifth starter, and then the Lakers will just have to stagger and find a way to blend those lineups a little bit better. But yeah, I guess that is one way to get Marcus in the starting lineup. BC says meet up in downtown LA. That is a good idea. It's been a minute since I've done a meetup. I think I was supposed to do one in like August, September, and just schedule kind of got away from me. But maybe, got to do one here within. It's probably tough right now with the holidays to knock it out in the next week. But at some point here, at the latest, like early to mid January, I want to do one within the next month for sure. So be on the lookout for that. And I know we've done a couple of West Side ones, so want to do one maybe a little bit more central for some people, which could be downtown LA. J-Man said I couldn't join the live last night, but was at the game. Awesome game. LOL. Love from Arizona. Appreciate that, man. Thank you. Shout out to you. Shout out to Arizona. One of my favorite Phoenix is one of my favorite road cities. Part of it's just very quick flight, but in covering the playoffs there, I ended up covering the 2021 finals run. We didn't have a Suns writer when I was back at the Athletic. So after they beat the Lakers, they put me on the Suns beat the rest of the way and ended up going to the finals. So spent a lot of time in Phoenix and really grew to enjoy the city. Leif says, besides it being unrealistic, how much would moving AR to the bench and getting someone like Drew Holiday help the Lakers go to the next level? I actually think if you got Drew Holiday, you could keep Austin in the starting group, have Drew Holiday be the fifth guy, and he's better defending ones and twos than he is threes, but I think there are a lot of threes, especially with teams playing a bit smaller on the perimeter sometimes, that he can defend. So he can be that 1 through 3 guy that basically is an upgraded version of a Marcus Smart, simply from a defense perspective, right? I don't want to like Holiday's at a different level than Marcus on both sides of the ball, but I think they're relatively close on defense. Like I would give Holiday the edge, and of course, like peak. I think at their peaks, I'd still pick Holiday defensively, but peak Marcus obviously won a defensive player of the year. But I mean, you could go that route. I think the one thing that I want to continue to get across is like, regardless of, I don't think Austin should come off the bench, but regardless of my own opinion, even if we put that to the side, the reality of the situation is that Austin is not going to come off the bench. The Lakers view him as a future franchise cornerstone alongside Luka. They view him as a max or near max player that they want to re-sign this summer. And you do not, there's a lot of elements that go into it, but sending that guy to the bench, I think would have some ramifications that would not be good for the Lakers ultimately. And we can debate whether that's fair or not, but when you have a player in a contract year who is having a career year and who is setting himself up for a nice payday, to try to diminish his value and move him to the bench, because let's just say they move him to the bench the rest of the year, I think what happens then is just Austin leaves this summer and goes and gets a bag from someone else and is the star or key starter somewhere else. And it's just kind of like, what was the point of this? So I'm not saying like that should be the way that they operate in terms of their decision making necessarily, but I also think again that it worked last night, and I think there is something to staggering the big three, but I think at the highest levels against the OKCs and the Denvers and the Houstons, the Lakers are really going to need Austin, because right now LeBron is looking better and LeBron is looking more like himself. But the version we've seen from Austin this year versus LeBron offensively, there has been a gap there. And LA needs to be an elite offense, I think. I think that the blueprint for LA is being an elite offense and an above average defense. And like last night, for example, they were not an elite offense. Last night was not a good offensive performance for LA. It was actually their worst shooting performance of the season and their third highest turnover percentage of the season. So statistically, it was actually one of their worst offensive performances of the season. Now, it was one of their best defensive performances, but I don't think this team, I don't think their ceiling is high enough defensively to do that against an OKC or a Denver, etc. I think they need to beat those teams with their offense, but also have a baseline level of defense. So to hit the offensive ceiling, you need a better Luka, you need a better LeBron, but you also need Austin, and you need a better, of course, a better Austin than his OKC performance, his Phoenix performance, etc. But I don't see Austin moving to the bench for a myriad of reasons. But the biggest one is like the political element. He's also like, you don't bench a guy who's averaging 28 a game. That has never happened before, ever, right? Like he is beyond the production level of a player who comes off the bench. It is what it is. Civic Citizen, how come we don't run Rui pick and rolls? He's not a good pick. I think again, this is one of the arguments for Rui potentially coming off the bench, because I just think it comes down to Rui is marginalized in the starting lineup. And we now have enough of a sample size here where it's been about 10 games or so with the starters. It's not the biggest sample size, but it's growing, that like Rui is the fifth option with the starting group. And we can debate whether it should be him or Ayton, like 4 versus 5, but Rui is the fifth guy right now. And you see that reflected in the shot attempts and the usage, and the general pecking order right now with the starting group is Luka, Austin, Austin and LeBron are pretty close, but like Austin's been ahead of him. LeBron, there's a bit of a gap, then Ayton, bit of a gap, then Rui. So right now, Rui's role as in the starting group is functionally corner catch and shoot, maybe relocating up to be an above the break shooter, but it's primarily off the ball. It's they haven't been running as many cutting actions for him, maybe a transition opportunity, maybe a deep seal post up. But for the most part, it's basically just Rui spot up, space the floor, and shoot. And to your point, I would argue Rui can do more than that. We've seen it. Rui is an excellent mid-range shooter. Rui can punish mismatches. Rui can cut along the baseline and finish. The issue is that's just not how the offense is running. And I do think you also, like, sometimes we look at these things in a vacuum, right? And we're like, okay, well, Rui's not getting enough shot attempts. We need to get Rui more shot attempts. But you have to take a step back and think about, okay, well, if Rui's getting more shot attempts, that means Luka's getting fewer shot attempts. That means Austin's getting fewer shot attempts. That means LeBron's getting fewer shot attempts. That means DA's getting fewer shot attempts. And there is a bit of a hierarchy and a bit of a pecking order. And Rui's just lower in that pecking order right now. So that's where I made the point earlier today on Lakers Collective of, I think there are a lot of ways that Rui, I think, could be more effective and used better off of the bench. But I think one of the biggest ones is if you are now having like the lineup, there's different variations of the Banshee lineup. But one of the Banshee lineups was Luka, Rui, Gabe, Jake, and Jackson. When Rui is out there with those other 4 guys, Rui, in my opinion, should be the number 2 option. And that is a big difference from being the number 5 option with the starters versus the number 2 option in a Banshee type lineup around guys in Jake and Gabe who are more limited than Rui offensively in terms of creating their own shot or not being as efficient. And then Jackson, of course, is going to get a steady dose of like pick and roll lobs and dump offs and whatnot. But Jackson's more so out there as a vehicle to create offense, to help Luka get downhill, to put pressure on the defense. So that's where I think Rui can be more effective and be used more because, again, to come back to the pick and rolls, the bread and butter of the starting group is the Luka DA pick and roll. The next one is the Austin DA pick and roll. Then we've been seeing them experiment more with LeBron as a screener. So it's just like, I think, again, if we're looking at this as like a menu, Rui's way down there on the menu. And it's just the reality of the situation. So if you want to maximize Rui, I think you play him in bench lineups where he is the number 2 or he is the number 3 option, and that will get him going more. And Rui, not as much pick and rolls, more so pick and pops. We saw this against Minnesota. He was really effective in pick and pop situations. He's not really a roller because he's not a lob threat. He's not he can dunk, but he's not an above average an above the rim finisher. You'll see even when Rui does get lobs, if he's wide open, he could dunk it, but oftentimes it'll be more of like a layup finish from him in the air. So he's not really going to be a pick and roll rim threat in that regard, but he can be a pick and pop big, which again was something that they burned Minnesota with how they were defending. So overall with Rui's usage, I do think there's an element of like he's the bellwether to the offense of if Rui's not getting shots, that means the Lakers aren't moving the ball. That means the ball is not, they're not touching the paint, creating those driving kicks, or they are touching the paint maybe, but it's more like isolation one-on-one stuff. But the other element is just he probably needs to come off the bench to be maximized offensively, which is kind of counterintuitive. But I think if you actually look at just the offensive hierarchy, right now he's in a spot where I think he's probably more of like a 6 to 8 field goal per game guy. And if you want that to nudge up to closer to 10 or even 12, I think there needs to be a real role shift and using him in different lineups. Super chat from BT Kingsley. Thank you for the super chat. We need a 2 or 3 3&D players, not just one. This has been something I've been thinking about lately, and I think I'm with you. I think I'm at least 2. If not, like, sure, 3 would be great. I think it's probably a little unrealistic based on the Lakers' current assets. But yeah, I think ideally they add a starter and then they add another bench player. And I think we're seeing now some of the limitations with this group in terms of Marcus has not been a reliable offensive contributor, and sometimes a detrimental offensive contributor with the turnover and the layup attempt last night on the heels of an 8 3-point game against San Antonio. So like we saw that ceiling of if they play off of him, he's going to let it fly, and he will have the nights where he hits a bunch of them. But there's also the nights where he's 2 for 7, like last night, multiple turnovers, some head scratching plays, and Marcus giveth and Marcus taketh. So Marcus is questionable in the offensive end. We know about Vando and his offense limitations. That's ultimately what phased him out of the rotation. And then even going to Gabe and Jake, like Jake has been very up and down offensively, more down than up, but he has had like the Minnesota game and a couple of performances where he has shown his offensive ceiling. And then with Gabe, it's primarily been not much on the offensive end. So I think, to your point, more so what I'm looking for are even guys of ideally defensive upgrades, but even guys of similar defensive capabilities to some of these guys in terms of a Smart or a Vando or a Jake or a Gabe. If you add more guys who are of similar levels defensively, but then can be more impactful offensively, that is a sweet spot here, right? Because again, I've made this point before with the Lakers, but a lot of times over the last few years, they've added shooters who no shade at this player, but like Troy Brown was kind of this guy where he had like the outline of a 3&D guy, but he was not quite a true 3&D guy. And it was like the jumper never really fell at the level you wanted it to fall. And he didn't really defend at the level you wanted him to defend. So he had like games and stretches where he was a plus on one side, but not consistently. And you want someone who's going to be, even if they're like a slightly below average shooter, at least like a threat from there. And that's where I give Marcus some credit of like, he will let it fly and he's not going to hit 8 threes every night, but like he's a threat from there, even if teams aren't going to ignore or, are going to ignore him. But I think you want like a baseline level offensively that a player is giving you, ideally higher and better than Gabe and Jake and Marcus and Vando, and then similarly effective to those guys defensively. And if you could add ideally that fifth starter who's like an upgrade on both sides compared to those guys, and then also another bench player or two who's similarly talented defensively but better offensively, I think that elevates this group to a different level. Mamadou, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, because of the CBA, do you feel like the Lakers really need to hit on their 2026 and 2028 draft picks? Yes and no. So I think in general, drafting has become really important, and you see the teams that continually draft well, they're just armed with more assets and more flexibility. So I think that's a big part of the new CBA. But in terms of like, so, I mean, there is a lot of pressure in general, especially when you have a particular window here that the Lakers are going to have of like, I don't know, the next ideally the next 5 years, right? To really compete. And then we'll see where they're at in the early 2030s. So yeah, I mean, I think there is pressure to hit on the 2026 and 2028 picks. I don't think it's like make or break necessarily. I think there are some bigger decisions, like what they do with Austin, what they do about LeBron, and is he back, and what's that number look like, or are they replacing him, and what does that pursuit look like? What happens with Rui? What happens with DA? What happens at this trade deadline? Like there are a lot of things I think even in between now and the 2026 pick that are really important that the Lakers are going to have to figure out and they're going to have to nail. But assuming that they can hit on most of those and make the right calculations and decisions, yeah, I think the 2026 and 2028 draft picks are really important because we've seen like when the Lakers have hit on their draft picks, that's when you get a Max Christie. That's when you get bringing it back to like a Larry Nance or a Kyle Kuzma. And I'm referencing those types of guys specifically because I do think the Lakers are going to be drafting in the 20s and then, maybe they trade up or something that they've like trading up in the second round, but it needs to be more of those like 20s and second round type guys. They need to identify the right types of players, which they have done throughout the last like decade, but they also have had some misses lately, right? Like JHS, Maxwell Lewis. I think Dalton it's too early to entirely write him off, but it is looking like a miss. Then Adu, way too early to have any sort of opinion, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think that the 2026 and 2028 draft picks are really important and could be a competitive advantage for LA if they can nail both of those. Devil's Knight 666. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for not promoting sports betting. It has ruined so many lives. Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest. I've talked about this before, but I'm not against sports betting. I probably placed like 3 bets in my life, and that was over a decade ago. So it's been a while. It was in my early 20s, but this is a quick aside here, but like I was considering starting to gamble on NBA games, and I did like 10 fake bets where I didn't actually put any money, and I was like, let me just see like if I'm doing these prop bets or picking against the spread, whatever, how would I fare? Like if I was going to bet on this, this is what my pick would be. And I went 8 for 10, and I was like, that's pretty good. Like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing. I think I know. Then I placed 3 prop bets, and I lost all 3 of them, and all of them were very close. Like one of them, this was insane. Chris Paul, so it was, I think it was 2014 or 2015. I bet on Chris Paul. He had an over under of 9.5 assists. He had 9 assists in the first half. I bet the over. He had 9 assists in the first half and did not have an assist in the second half. And that was like my lesson into gambling of I'm not going to gamble. This is just designed for you to lose your money. So yeah, I mean, I'm not against it because most of my friends do it, and I have no like moral issue with it. If you want to gamble. But yeah, it's not something that I really resonate with. As I said last night, it is a sponsor, or there is a gambling sponsor for Lakers Collective, so I'm doing the ad reads for that. But for my show, I've had several gambling companies reach out, and I have rejected them, and I've left money on the table. But just out of like, part of it's just like my own preference and what type of brands I want to align with. But part of it is also you guys. You guys have been very vocal about not wanting me to promote sports betting, and I take that to heart, and I'm listening to you guys. So yeah, I appreciate you acknowledging that. Appetizers and sushi, what up? Thank you for super chat. Luka, and the second half he's been ghost. How can he be better? Luka in the second half has been ghost. Are we talking about like all season, or are you talking about recently? Because I don't think Luka has had some big fourth quarters for the Lakers this year, and even in the Philly game had some big plays for LA. So I don't think I would agree with the characterization that Luka has been a ghost. I'm looking at it right now on NBA.com, pulling up the fourth quarter scoring just to see where Luka is at. I know Austin was technically leading the group in scoring. He's still Austin's sixth in the NBA in fourth quarter scoring. Luka is 34th. He's averaging 5.6 points per game, shooting 40%, 17% on threes, 85% at the free throw line. So yeah, I mean, he could be more efficient in the fourth quarter, but and if we want to move it to halves, let's just see what it looks like in second halves. He is 14th in the NBA in scoring, averaging just under 14 points per game. Whereas first half, I believe he's either leading the league or among the league leaders. 21. Yeah, he's leading the NBA by almost 5 points per game in the first half. So, I mean, we've talked about this before, but the way that Luka likes to attack is he likes to strike early. And, I made the analogy to being a boxer, where Luka is the type of boxer who's going to come out, he's going to hit you a bunch of times, get you on the defensive, and then get you in your plan B, plan C, plan D, get you counter reacting to his initial flurry. And that's what we've seen a bunch this season, where Luka will have these big first quarters, big first halves, and then teams start throwing the kitchen sink at him in terms of trapping, blitzing, and that's what gets the 4-on-3, 3-on-2 going. Phoenix is an exception because Phoenix has been willing to live with Luka in 1-on-1 and 2-on-2 situations. Now, I will even note within that, they also did counter last night, and we're throwing in some blitzing and some trapping and some switching. And in the fourth quarter, they started switching Luka ball screens, and they had Mark Williams on Rui, actually, and helping off of Rui as a roamer along the baseline. But I don't think it's fair to say Luka's been a ghost in the second half. But certainly not been as impactful or effective from a scoring perspective in the second half as he is in the first half. Like right now, he first half leading scorer in the NBA by almost 5 points. That's insane. But obviously, the second half, he's much more in playmaker mode. Excuse me. Quick water break. Danica's really trying to get the chat going here. Thank you for the super chat. When will the Lakers recover from the Russ trade? It's a fair question. I think they will recover from the Russ trade when they have multiple 3&D players on the team. That will be when the Russ cycle has officially closed. I mean, I think they've recovered in the sense of like they got Luka, right? And so they're set up for the next half decade plus. But I mean, I will say, I think there will be a documentary on the Russ trade, or like a 30 for 30 or something like that, a Netflix doc, whatever. I would love to participate in it because I was covering the team. Not to pat myself on the back too much here, but I do remember there's a lot of optimism within the LA media when they got Russ. And I remember even writing, you could go back and read the story after the Lakers signed Russ, a trade for him, that I was expressing some skepticism of the basketball fit and how this would all work and whether he could play off the ball, whether he'd be willing to sacrifice off the ball, and just LA shifting in a direction of like the 3-star build, but like the 3 stars not really complementing each other to the degree that you wanted. And to a degree, like it's totally different when it's KD, Steph, and Clay because of the shooting. It's totally different when it's Kyrie, Harden, and KD also because of the shooting. But when it's LeBron, AD, and Russ, that just was not the cleanest fit offensively, to say the least. And we saw that play out over a year and a half. But they're still recovering, to be completely honest. And like it had real ramifications, especially between the Lakers and LeBron / Clutch. Like, it just did. But I think they're almost there. They're almost the basketball gods have almost forgiven them. BT Kingsley, thank you for the super chat. Why are we clinging to this pick if more come in the summer? Are you talking about the 2026 pick? Or so I think, my understanding is I think the Lakers are clinging to the pick for a potential shot at Giannis this summer or into next season, or whatever star potentially becomes available this offseason. So that is a calculus within this of you could have 3 picks on draft night to trade, which if let's just say for argument's sake, the Lakers have the 26th pick, you could theoretically, or maybe, back channel this like, hey, Milwaukee, if we give you this pick plus 2 other firsts plus sign and trade Austin and we make the money work. And even then because it's the offseason, the typical CBA dynamics are a bit more flexible in terms of trades and you taking on, like, you still have to get under the different aprons and caps at certain points, but like there's a little bit more flexibility in the offseason. Hey, would you do Austin plus X plus 3 picks for Giannis? That's a conversation you could have, and then you could draft technically like on behalf of Milwaukee. If you don't have that extra pick, then now you're really offering, the 2026 pick plus another pick plus Austin. It's just a different level of package. Now, the Giannis situation is going to be interesting to see because I don't know what he wants, right? Like, I believe he wants to be in New York, but at the same time, he's not like outright asking out. He's not demanded a trade, but then he keeps having these like leaks come out that he wants a warm weather city, or he's looking at properties in New York or this or that. And it's like, at this point I just want dude to make a decision, and it clearly seems like he's leaning toward leaving Milwaukee. He just doesn't want to be the bad guy, and I get it to a degree, but like it's sort of like dragging out a relationship. You ever been in a dysfunctional relationship and the best thing to do is just break up, but you're dragging it out and you don't want to be the bad person. You don't want to be the bad guy to break up. And you're like, well, if I drag this out and really like get them to be as miserable as I am, maybe they'll move on. It's like, no, dude, just end it. Just end it and move on. And then, have your pick of the teams you want to go to. But that would be the biggest reason. The other reason would also be to have, in general, it's better to have more picks than less. It gives you more flexibility. And let's say LeBron retires or LeBron leaves. Then all of a sudden the Lakers have some flexibility that they could take on a contract in a trade. They can sign and trade and, acquire someone that way. So there's some more flexibility this offseason to move into the next era of Lakers basketball, which if we're like, the next era of Lakers basketball will be the post LeBron era, if only just because like LeBron is only going to play at most 2 more years, but probably only 1. If he doesn't, we still don't know if he's going to retire or not. So realistically, like the Lakers will look much different post LeBron because that will be a lot of money off the books and they will have to reshape the roster. So I think having that flexibility to potentially make that type of move in the offseason, I think would be nice. Alma, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, what do you think happens next year with LBJ? Assuming he doesn't retire, do you think it's more beneficial for the Lakers to retain him for a lot less money or finally move on? It's a good question. I think, in my opinion, I would like a little bit more of a sample size of this version of LeBron before making a read on what the best decision is. I think there's a lot of context here and a lot of different ways that this can play out. I would say I will say, I think I said this last night, like LeBron deserved the contract he got because he got the contract he got. And you get the contract you get based on your production. And I'm not a pocket watcher. I'm not going to retroactively be like, hey, he shouldn't have got this. He shouldn't have got the player option. Like LeBron, in the totality of his career, has been underpaid on the basketball court. They estimated when he left Cleveland, the Cleveland economy took a $1 billion hit. And at the time, he was making like 20 something million from Cleveland, right? So just think about that. This dude's making 20 something million. His worth to the city is 1 billion plus. That is a pretty big gap there, right? So this dude has been underpaid for the entirety of his career. And so I'm not going to pocket watch with the contract situation. At the same time, objectively, he has not played at a $50+ million level. So if we are judging that for the next contract, the current version of him that we've seen is not a $50 million player. Now, I think he's been playing better. I think he's going to continue to play better. And I think LeBron in January, February, March, April is going to progressively look better, barring injury. And I think that version will be a more consistent player, a more efficient player, and look closer to the LeBron we saw last year. At the same time, he's going to be 41. So like, that's where I'm kind of weighing all these different factors of he's dealing with the sciatica. That could be something he just deals with for the rest of his career, right? And that's in play here, especially based on his age. So there's a lot of potential risk with injury and age, and just like at some point, Father Time does catch up. It has not caught him yet, but so I would say, if assuming he plays better and progresses well throughout the course of the season, I'd be open to him returning if I'm the Lakers on a probably like a 1-year deal and a lesser salary. Now, would he be open to that? Does he want the max? Does he want close to the max? Does he want a different situation? I don't know the answers to those questions. I know that going back to last summer, he wanted every penny, and that's why he opted in. So, it does not seem like he's going to take a massive discount, but I don't know that for sure. So I think it really depends on how he plays the rest of the season, how healthy he is the rest of the season, and just ultimately the fit of LeBron, Luka, and Austin. Because if we know Luka is locked up with the extension, we know LA's trying to re-sign Austin. So if those are two of your franchise cornerstones and LA can't quite get the LeBron, Luka, Austin trio to fit together, then that's a different conversation. Like if the Lakers, let's say the Lakers have like a great rest of the season, right? And there's no reason to expect them not to, but let's say they win like 55 games, they're the 3 seed, and they lose in round 1 again. Or maybe they lose in round 2 and it's like not really competitive. And all of the data is basically LA is winning in spite of the big 3, which has kind of been like, they have not quite clicked yet in terms of their on-court performance together. If that's the reality, then I think you have to make a hard decision next summer and be like, hey, we just don't think this is going to work. But I think it's way too early to make a call in either direction. And I just don't know where LeBron's going to be at in April and May and where the Lakers are going to be at in April and May. And I do think, and I think the same thing with Austin. Like I've said, even with, like, I think LA should retain Austin, but whether Austin and Luka fit will be determined in April, May, and potentially June, right? Like they can look great in the regular season. If they don't look great in the playoffs together, that's a different conversation. Similar thing with LeBron. So I think it's too early to make a read, but I would tentatively make the read of like him on a sizable discount staying in LA. If not, if he's not open to that, or the Lakers just don't think it's the right fit, then that's a different conversation entirely. But that would be my like tentative read right now. But again, I think a lot's going to be determined between now and like April or May. My mom, thank you for the super chat. Thanks everyone here. Please show support and hit the like button. So also hit the subscribe button if you have not yet subscribed. I would really appreciate it. But yes, shout out to my mom, Mama Buha in the house. Dalboys 805, thank you for the super chat. If not Lakers, what team would you cover? I think if I was not covering the Lakers specifically, I'd want to cover the NBA in its entirety, and that's already something I've tried to do more of with Beyond the Block and trying to do a national show every week. If I had to cover, like that was like longer, like that, like getting into the industry, I guess I don't know how you guys view it for those who are outside the industry. Maybe some of you watching or listening are inside the industry, but like coming up in the industry, the goal is always to go national. Like the people who are the most respected and well-known and best compensated are the national people, right? Like, just look at, like a Brian Windhorst or a Zach Lowe or someone like that. Like that is sort of the pinnacle of NBA journalism, NBA coverage, NBA analysis, NBA reporting. So I think that's always been my North Star and what I aspire to achieve. So I think for me, I always had the plan to cover the Lakers for a certain amount of time and then eventually branch out to like the broader NBA. At the same time, like I've really loved what I've been doing for now going on almost 2 years, and I have no plans to stop that. So I think I'm trying to have the best of both worlds of covering the Lakers and covering the broader NBA, and like just managing it that way. But I guess if I had to cover another team, I would probably cover the Knicks because I love New York. And if I had to move or cover a different team, it would be the Knicks. If we're just talking like what basketball team would be really fun to cover, I mean, it's hard not to be intrigued by what OKC is doing, but at the same time, they don't have the best access for reporters. And so I don't know. I mean, I would not want to cover any other team other than the Lakers, but if I had to, I'd probably pick the Knicks. Mamadou, thank you for the super chat. Feels like teams like Denver and Golden State don't really fear me anymore. It's more like the athletic teams like Spurs, Houston, and OKC. My only thing here is I want to see what LA and Denver look like right now or like this season. The Lakers looked really good against Denver down the stretch of last season, going 2-1 against them. And a couple of those games, both teams had guys out. So I would say the game that was like the closest to full strength was the game where that was like Luka's arrival or breakout game as a Laker in terms of like really looking like Luka. And that's what, remember JJ said he had a blackout moment and he was getting into it with the crowd, getting into it with the bench. And he was carving up Denver's defense and they could not guard him in the pick and roll. That does give me confidence in the Lakers' ability to attack Denver and test Jokic's defense. I think he's better on that end than people give him credit for, but he's far from an elite rim protector, and you can exploit him. I actually think you exploit him more on the perimeter than around the basket, and that's where Luka, of course, thrives in terms of exploiting certain bigs. Like you saw what he did to Zubats, like who's a better version of Jokic defensively, of course. Like he could do that to Jokic as well. But I will note that like Denver at full strength this year, when they have had Brown and Gordon, this is the best defensive group they've had in the Jokic era. So I I still think Luka will have his way and the Lakers can beat them and can match up well with them. But I do want to note that, like, I think if you're holding on to what Denver used to be, I think this version of Denver is better, particularly on the defensive end. Golden State, I agree. I mean, Golden State's in shambles right now. So, like, they can, I don't want to, like, I don't want to dismiss their speed, because their speed has been a real issue for the last two times these two teams have played regular season games. The Warriors have emphatically kicked the Lakers' butt. Like that game in March and then opening night. So I think that the Warriors are clearly going through it. And I think that the current version of them is not playing anywhere near the basketball they were playing to end last season or even to start this season. But I will note the Warriors' speed has given the Lakers some problems over the last year or so. But in general, I agree with you. I think the more athletic teams of the Spurs, Rockets, and Thunder, I guess three of the four Texas, kind of Midwest teams there, Texas and OKC teams, or OK teams technically. Those teams do give the Lakers some problems, and that is going to be the challenge for them. That, like, they're playing some of the most like, there might not be a more quick / athletic perimeter trio of point guard / like lead ball handlers as Fox, Harper, and Castle. Houston has Amen Thompson, who's probably pound for pound the most athletic player in the league. And they're just a big, nasty team that mashes you in the paint. And then OKC is OKC, right? We don't need to, I mean, half the rotation should be on the all defense team. Like, it's just an embarrassment of riches. So yeah, I agree with you that I think if you are slower, I would also throw Minnesota in here. That I think Minnesota is more on the Denver Golden State side of this than they are the San Antonio, Houston, OKC side. They do have some guys in Ant and Jaden, maybe Clark, that can give the Lakers some problems with their athleticism overall. But I don't think that team has been the same as last season. And I put them more on like the Denver Golden State side of being not as athletic and not as physically imposing. But San Antonio, I mean, the issue for the Lakers is San Antonio, Houston, and OKC. They're probably going to have to go through. They're going to have to go through at least one of them, if not two of those, to get to the finals. And right now, at least with the current roster, it looks like a challenge. Going to go about 10 more minutes here until the 1 hour mark. Music Hill 420. Herb won't fix LA alone. We need more than HJ, Jovan. Yeah, I didn't say, in the past, I thought that Herb, not that he would fix everything, but that he would certainly help. I still think that, but to the original super chat from BT Kingsley, I do think it's probably 2 to 3. One thing we talked about on Lakers Collective, I think it was last week at some point, Jason brought up the 2018 Cavs and that being a potential model for LA in terms of, like, they might just need a bit of a reshuffle with the bench. And if you could keep the top 6 of the starters plus Marcus and basically anyone else, and Jackson I would throw in there, like that's 7, top 7. If you are flipping a Gabe or a Maxey or both, and like a Dalton or something, plus whatever picks or whatever matching salary, and you could get a couple of upgrades, like that would be huge. And for example, if you throw in Gabe and Maxey, you could get Herb and Sadiq Bey, right? And if you have Herb starting, you have Sadiq Bey coming off the bench next to Rui and Marcus. All of a sudden, I really like that top 8, right? So you would have to throw in probably Dalton and a first and the second and probably multiple swaps. You're going to have to empty the bank. You're going to have to empty the cupboard. But if you could also get like Herb and Sadiq Bey, Herb and Jose Alvarado, something like that, I think that would really help the Lakers. So I think they need more than just Herb. But if the consolation prize is just Herb, I do think that objectively makes the Lakers better. Michael D, thank you for being a member for a month. I appreciate it. And you have a classic profile picture. Nala always asks great basketball questions. I appreciate it, Nala. Thank you for the super chat. Given the lack of free agent talent this offseason, is there any way we don't make a move with all the expirings? I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what the Lakers are going to do, because no matter how confident I've been in certain things over the last few years, or just thought that something was very obvious in terms of what the Lakers should do, they always have a trick up their sleeve. And, so I would not say that they're certainly going to make a move. I think they are likely to make a move, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? Like, I think it's more likely than not. The one thing with this, though, is if we go back a couple years to the Mo Bamba, Malik Beasley stuff, and like how LA had those contracts that they could have done something with and decided not to, that is an example of LA not always maximizing their assets. And this has been a bit of a trend in terms of having expirings or different contracts that they can move. Like, for example, I had someone tell me last summer, remember last summer was they had the Cam Reddish contract, they had the Christian Wood contract, and they ultimately sat on those until they had to get rid of them during the season. And it partly cost them Gary Trent Jr., who, my understanding, as I reported last summer, he would have gone to LA over Milwaukee had LA had a roster spot. LA didn't have a roster spot. They could not sign Gary Trent Jr. Or I forget if they didn't have a roster spot or if they were too close to the apron. But like, had they gotten rid of Christian Wood, Cam Reddish, two guys who clearly were not going to contribute to last season's team, and it was very clear over the summer, then they could have signed a Gary Trent for a minimum. And say what you want about Gary Trent, and he's not a perfect player, but I would have rather had Gary Trent on a minimum than Cam Reddish on a minimum or Christian Wood on a minimum. And Gary Trent far outperformed his contract last season. So I think they've had situations where they, for whatever reason, don't do, like, they're kind of weird sometimes with getting rid of contracts. I don't know if it's like admitting that they messed up or like what it is, but there has been some details within their cap situation over the last few years that they have not always maximized. So I say all that to say, like, if you told me, hey, they think Gabe is a good value on his current contract and JJ likes Gabe and they want to keep Gabe in the rotation and they don't want to trade Gabe, would I be that surprised? Like, not really. Now, Maxey, I think, is the one that is just not in the rotation. And especially now that Vando looks to be reemerging in the rotation, it's like you cannot have a guy like Maxey just sitting there making $11 million and not maximizing that spot on your salary sheet. So I think at a minimum, something of probably like Maxey and Dalton together and see what you could get in that price range. Like, you could get a Herb with that money. Of course, you'd have to throw in a bunch of draft capital to get New Orleans to even consider that. But yeah, I think there is a way they don't make a move, but I would say it's more likely than not that they do. Chuck Dangler, aka Fang Charlie, yo, got your mail. Thanks. Did you see Vando's social media post? Seems like he got himself unleashed. Love it. Your favorite Laker moment all time? I would say I have two favorite Lakers moments all time, both when I was a kid, and I would say the Ori shot against Sacramento, Game 4, 2002 Western Conference Finals, and then also the .4 shot, Derek Fisher, Western Conference Semifinals. I believe that was also Game 4. If I'm not mistaken, Game 4, Game 5, I think Game 4 against San Antonio, 2004. Those two shots were honestly more so Fisher because, like, as a kid, I couldn't wrap my head around him even getting a shot up in .4. Like, I knew that was the like minimum time at that point that they deemed like you could get an actual shot up, right? It's .4 for a shot, .3 for a tip in. But him making that shot was just, I mean, that's the loudest I've ever screamed in terms of a sports moment. And I still remember where I was in my living room when Fisher made that shot. And then Ori, I would say a close second in terms of my excitement, because that I mean, Lakers are about to go down 3-1, right? And I think they still would have had a chance in that series to come back from 3-1, but typically you go down 3-1, you're done. And then especially with game 5 back in Sacramento. So that, like, just the anxiety I had at the end of that game, because at least the Fisher one, I had anxiety, but it's like you can kind of prepare. Like there's a time, Duncan hits the shot, then there's the timeout, and I'm like freaking out, like what's going to happen? What are they going to draw up? Who's going to take the shot? This, that. But like there's something a little bit more calming with the timeout in the moment with the final sequence there against Sacramento. It's just like madness, and it's just like a bang, bang, bang play. And then all of a sudden the ball gets tipped out to Ori. And the second you see the ball get tipped out to Ori, you just know it's going in. Like you just knew it. You felt it. And also I would say one of the best camera jobs that anyone has done for a game winner, right? Like the camera work that they had, like that's one of the just objectively like one of the best clips of a game winner, of like the whole sequence and the tip out to Ori and like the multiple angles. Then they're right there on the floor as all the guys are converging on him. I can't really think of another, like I think maybe Dame and his walk off against OKC and them collapsing on him and the wave goodbye and whatever. But it's like an all-time camera job too. I would say, like, shout out to that cameraman. All right. Going about 5 more minutes. Rod says, I like the profile picture too. I'm with Colossal. Maxi for Kaminga. I mean, if you want, Colossus, not Colossal, by the way. Yeah, sure. Nah, I mean, what Warriors fans would burn down the Chase Center if that happened. Chuck Dangler says Kobe's final games, I cried like a kid. Yeah, I mean, Kobe's final game is probably, I would say my 2 favorite games I've ever attended are Kobe's final game and LeBron breaking the scoring record. I've talked about that one where we got to go on the floor, and being on the floor for the first, like I go on the floor pregame, I go on the floor postgame. It's different being on the floor actually during the game and turning around and just doing that like panoramic view around Staples Center. I'm not going to call it crypto.com. Just incredible. To Sizzle, does Lil Buha believe in Santa? What's on his list? Yes. No, he does not. He somehow in the last year found out that Santa isn't real. I apologize to people who don't know that, who I just spoiled it for. What's on his list? He's obsessed with Fortnite. And I've talked about that's why I play Fortnite now. Is one of the things that we bond over and get to play together. So he wants V-Bucks, he wants Fortnite Legos, he wants Fortnite action figures. So a lot of that, some Minecraft stuff, some Stranger Things stuff. But those are the things he's into. A lot of video games and sort of like sci-fi and honestly horror. He's kind of, I don't know where he gets it from because I'm not into horror at all, but he really likes horror and scary things. But not getting him anything in that realm, but some sci-fi and fantasy and video game stuff. Elcon, what trade are you expecting today? There's been some buzz that there might be a trade within the next 24 hours because players traded today can be reaggregated ahead of the deadline. So that means that anyone traded today or tomorrow can be then repackaged before the deadline, which is only specific to today and tomorrow. I have not really heard any specific names though. So nothing really to add other than it does sound like there's a possibility something happens here in the next 24 hours. J Bill says, did bro just say his favorite game was when LeBron lost while breaking the scoring record? Next level shilling. Well, I've talked about why that was my favorite game, and it had one, witness history, and you can make fun of that. That's cool, but that was a historic moment, whether you like it or not. But two, to that point, that was the first game, and the Lakers have now done this multiple times, but this was the first game they did this since I've been covering the team, where they brought the beat writers onto the floor. Because remember, they stopped the game. It was a whole production, whole ceremony. Adam Silver comes out, Kareem comes out, and that was a really cool moment for me because it was the first time I did something I'd never done. At the time, it was 2023, 2022. So, I mean, I've been covering the NBA for over 10 years at that point, and still, I had never been on the floor during the game. I've sat, there's some media seating where it's kind of courtside. So like technically I've sat courtside before, but I've never sat courtside as like a fan at a game. And I've never actually been like in the middle of the floor during a game. I've been in the middle of the floor pregame. I've been in the middle of the floor postgame, but typically like postgame, no one's there. The arena's cleared out. Pregame, especially with when we go on the floor, the arena's barely full. It's probably not even a quarter full. So being on the floor with 19,000, whatever many people looking down at like history that just happened and just taking that all in, it was an awesome moment. And if you think that's shilling, then so be it. You know, that you're entitled to that perspective, but it doesn't even have to do with LeBron. It actually more had to do with, like, of course, the historic moment, the historic nature of what happened for sure is a big part of that. But this has nothing to do with LeBron even necessarily. This is more, they brought us on the floor in the middle of a ceremony, and it was just a really cool moment to like look at the arena from a different perspective that really only the players get to look at it from. Because again, even the courtside people, they're not standing at half court the way that we were. So it was a cool moment. But I know that for some people that you know, they're going to look at the negative with it. DJJ, thank you for the super chat. Rui, Maxi, and Gabe for DeJounte Sadiq seconds, set up DK seconds for Keon, bonafide contender. I like to explain my reason, but don't have $1,000. You said DeJounte? So DeJounte, I read through this as Herb. So I was like, in my head, I immediately went to, you're going to have to throw in a first tier to do that. DeJounte, I believe, has 2 more years left, which I make it 32.8 and then 30.8 player option. He's going to pick that up. I will decline this. The only way, so Lakers only have 1 second to trade, so they can't trade. Oh, so okay, so you're saying they get the seconds from the Pelicans and then they trade some combination of the seconds, DK plus for Keon. I'll be honest, there was a time I was a DeJounte guy and wanted LA to trade for DeJounte. You look at just his injury history specifically last year, but even like over the last 6 years, he's not played this season, and he was obviously got injured last year. A couple years ago, was relatively healthy. Year before that, relatively healthy. Then the 3 years before that, he missed anywhere between 14 to 16 games in 3 straight seasons. So like, he's not the most durable player. He's also now entering, he's 29, going to be 30 next season, coming off a major injury, and has real money left. I also just don't think, I think one of my big gripes with DeJounte is I think he's very overrated defensively, and there was a time like 4 years ago where he was a really good defender, but he has not been that level of defender for a bit. Didn't work out in Atlanta. It's not working out in New Orleans. I think that's too detrimental of a contract to take on. And I don't think he fits next to Luka and Austin. Now, if you're going to follow this up and say you want to do an Austin trade or longer term move Austin, that's a different conversation. But if you're talking about, if you're trading for DeJounte, you have to start. You're not trading for a $30 million player to come off the bench. Like that's starter level money. So you're either paying a guy off the bench 30 million, which I think is a mistake and a misuse of your assets, or you're starting him next to Luka and Austin, and I don't think that's a good perimeter trio defensively. So I'm completely out on the DeJounte part of it. I get what you're saying, though. I would flip this to Herb, and that gets interesting. Lakers have to obviously give up more, but if you could get Herb and Keon and Sadiq, that to me is like probably the best case scenario. That's a home run. Walter White says, Jovan, can the Lakers get Justin Champagnie from the Wizards, or do you think it's possible to trade for him to improve our bench? I think it's possible. I would not rule that. Like, if I'm Washington, everyone's on the table other than my like core group of keepers. So yeah, he's only averaging 14 minutes per game, not having a good shooting season, shooting 26% on threes, but last year shot 38%. He's been pretty up and down as a shooter because he went 36%, 20%, 29, 38, 26. So the streakiness there, but I do like him defensively, especially as like a bench wing. Only 24. I'd rather have him than Dalton, for example. So, I mean, depending on the ultimate like price and the finances of it, I'd be down. And then final one here before I wrap. Lawrence asks, what solutions for JJ to improve the bench into top 20 since they're 30th in the league? I assume this is in reference to bench scoring. I think part of it is just the makeup of LA's offense. I do think one thing that would help would be moving Rui to the bench. I think if you just look objectively at the Lakers bench right now, or even the roster, right? Who are the Lakers' 5 best offensive players? Who are their 5 best scorers? They're all starting. So when you have a relatively imbalanced roster and rotation in terms of your best scorers are all starting and your best defenders are all coming off the bench, and none of those guys are consistent offensive threats. Like, again, to bring it back to a conversation earlier, Marcus Smart, not a consistent offensive player. Jared Vanderbilt, a very limited offensive player to the point that it has pushed him out of the rotation. Jake LaRavia, Gabe Vincent, both very inconsistent offensively. So Jackson Hayes has actually probably been the best and most consistent of those guys as like an offensive threat, giving you 6-8 points consistently. But there are nights that group will combine for like 12 points. There are nights where they might combine for like 24 points. But I think as long as the Lakers situation maintains in terms of the current starting lineup, the current bench, the bench is always going to be, I think, like 30th is extreme, and maybe they climb up a little bit higher, but I think they're going to be a bottom 5 bench in terms of scoring because they don't have bench scorers. The one bench scorer they have, or a couple, are Dalton and Nick Smith, but those guys have not been good enough defensively to earn permanent rotation roles. So they are on the outskirts of the rotation. Nick Smith is obviously also a two-way guy, so he can't play every single game. But unless the Lakers are pulling Jake or Gabe out of the rotation, which I do not foresee happening, if the primary lineups are the starters and Marcus and Gabe and Jake and Jackson and now potentially Vando, that is arguably 4 of your 5 best defenders off the bench and your 5 best scorers all starting. And none of those bench guys are going to give you double-digit outputs consistently. That's just not how any of those guys are wired, not how any of them have played this season. So I think one solution is a trade and upgrading the bench in that regard. The other solution would be moving your 5th best scorer and 5th option in the starting group, Rui, moving him to the bench and empowering him more as like a number 2 or 3 option in certain bench lineups. That's, I think, a way to balance it. If Rui comes off the bench and is averaging 15, that alone is going to dramatically increase LA's bench scoring. I personally been on the record, I don't think the bench scoring is as big of a concern, especially because they're starting basically all their firepower with the starters. But I think more so the bench, just like overall play, has been concerning, where it's been very up and down and very unreliable. But I think that the 2 solutions here are either move one of the starters to the bench, I think the only realistic one would be Rui. They're not moving Austin. They're not moving LeBron. And then, potentially make a trade. Like those are really the two options. But I'm going to wrap here. I appreciate you all for rocking with me for a little bit over an hour. I will be back tomorrow. The Lakers are practicing, so I will be going live after that with a practice report and another Q&A. So we'll be back very soon. But appreciate you guys. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to the chat. What up, Connor Phillips? Seeing you just now in the chat. But appreciate you guys. Probably going, not sure what time yet, but probably sometime in Lakers usually practice around 12. So I'll probably go sometime between like 3 and 5 again tomorrow. But I would say 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, somewhere in that range. But I'll let you guys know once I set the time. But appreciate it. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow. I will talk to you all then. Enjoy the rest of your Mondays.